ونضع الموازين القسط ليوم القيامة فلا تظلم نفس شيئا وإن كان مثقال حبة من خردل أتينا بها وكفى بنا حاسبين. We set up the scales of justice for the day of judgment, so no soul will be wronged in the least. And even if a deed is the weight of a mustard seed, we will bring it forth, and sufficient are we as a vigilant reckoner. In this verse of the Qur'anic Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sketches an image and portrays a certain scene that will happen on the day of Qiyamah, and that is وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطِ, the scales and the weights and balances of peace and justice will be placed on the day of Qiyamah. The word mawazin is the plural of the word mizanun, which means a scale. Most of the commentators of the Quran have mentioned that although the plural is used, on the day of Qiyamah there will be one scale that will be used to weigh the deeds of the children of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. How this will happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. He is able to give form to our actions, while other commentators say that the books and records of deeds that the angels were writing will be put on these scales and balances on the day of Qiyamah. Therefore, yes, there will be this weight, this scale on the day of Qiyamah that will measure the a'mal, the actions of the children of Adam alayhi salatu wassalam. وَإِن كَانَ مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِّنْ خَرْدَلٍ أَتَيْنَا بِهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says whether it is equal to a mustard seed, good deed or bad deed. فَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. A person who sees an atom's weight or does an atom's weight of good or an atom's weight of evil, that will be brought forth on the day of Qiyamah and the person will be able to see it. Therefore, on the day of Qiyamah, that is a day of justice where each person will either be rewarded, forgiven, or punished for his good deeds and his evil deeds. فَلَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. Nobody will be oppressed in any way whatsoever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just. It is mentioned in the ahadith so much so that an animal that had horns that hit another animal without horns, those animals will also be brought forth on the day of Qiyamah, and justice will take place and happen between these animals that fought with each other. One may have oppressed the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make justice prevail on the day of Qiyamah. Similarly, as far as the actions of mankind is concerned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also bring justice as far as their a'mal and deeds are concerned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah will bring forth whatever we have done. وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. In another verse of the Qur'anic Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they will find what they did all day. So there will be accountability of deeds on the day of Qiyamah. Sayyidatuna Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha reports that a man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and narrated to him that he had two slaves and they had called him a liar. They were dishonest in their dealings and they did not obey his orders. In retaliation, he scolded them and he beat them. How then would his chastisement of his slaves be judged in relation to their misconduct? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that their misdeed would be weighed against the punishment which he inflicted on them, and if the two were equally balanced, then the matter would rest there. But in the case in case their crimes exceed his punishment, it would be regarded as a favor bestowed on them by him. But on the other hand, if the punishment awarded to them exceeded their misdeeds, then he would be made subject to punishment and retaliation for his excess. The man then rose and sat down in a corner and started weeping. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him whether he had not read this verse of the Quran, وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, that we shall place scales to do justice on the day of Qiyamah. The man said that he had no choice but to free his slaves so that he might escape accountability, as mentioned in Tafsir al-Qurtubi. Therefore, there will be accountability for whatever deeds we do or retaliate about or in regard to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take us to task if He wishes to do so on the day of Qiyamah for any given action that we may have carried out in this world. Therefore, a person should be very conscious in regard to what he is doing, in regard to the actions that he is carrying out on a daily basis, whether it is to do with his employers or employees, his subordinates, his colleagues, his family members, his children, the asatiza, a student, a teacher, etc. So a person should be very, very careful in regard to every action that he does physically, every word that comes out of his mouth verbally, and as far as the thoughts as well. A person should try to keep good thoughts, or rather have no thoughts about a person, remain blank and be negligent of the deeds of other people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show and will make sure that justice will prevail on the day of Qiyamah amongst every single type of species, and most importantly us as humans, amongst humanity as well. Justice will prevail. So let us be prepared for this day. It is a day of justice, where every deed that we have done or we will do in our lives will be brought in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and justice will take place, and justice will happen in the court of Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an easy accountability. Allahumma hasibna hisaban yasira. May Allah grant us an easy reckoning. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. And grant us the consciousness of this verse of the Quran and of this day, of the day of Qiyamah, when every single action of ours will be brought in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.